Kenny Dalglish was 34 years old when the call came from Brussels on the night of the 29th of May 1985. He had played 90 minutes in the European Cup final against Juventus, scored the penalty that put Liverpool ahead, and then watched helplessly as the evening turned into the blackest in the club's history. 39 people, mostly Italians, died when a wall collapsed under the weight of fleeing supporters at the Heysel Stadium. Kenny stood on the pitch long for the final whistle, arms draped around grieving teammates, staring at bodies covered in red and white flags. When he finally flew home the next day, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years overnight. 8 days later, the Liverpool board asked him to become player manager. Bob Paisley had retired, Joe Fagan had resigned in the wake of the disaster, and the club needed someone the players trusted absolutely. Kenny said yes, because he could not imagine saying no. He had been at Anfield 8 years by then, had replaced Kevin Keegan, had lifted 3 European Cups, but nothing had prepared him for what came next. The ban on English clubs in Europe was immediate and indefinite. Liverpool, the most successful side on the continent, was suddenly locked out of the competition that defined them. The press screamed for blood, politicians demanded lifetime bans, and every supporter who wore red felt the shame. Kenny's first job was to stop the club from falling apart. He cancelled the players' holidays, dragged them back for double sessions, and told them the only way to honour the dead was to play the game properly again. He spoke quietly, the Glasgow accent still thick, but when he looked you in the eye you believed him. Then came the summer of 1989. On the 15th of April, Kenny was at Hillsborough for an FA Cup semi-final against Nottingham Forest. He stood in the director's box with his wife Marina when the moment the crush began. From high up he could see the bodies piling against the fences, could see police officers frozen, could see the blue of emergency lights arriving far too late. 97 Liverpool supporters would eventually die, 96 that spring and summer, the 97th years later from his injuries. Kenny and Marina drove home in silence, then turned the car around and went straight to the hospital. For the next fortnight they barely left the wards. Kenny attended funeral after funeral, 66 in total, sometimes 4 in a single day. He would walk into a church in Anfield, or Walton or Huyton, shake the hands of mothers who had lost teenage sons, place a scarf on a coffin, and somehow find words when no words were possible. Marina held wives who could not stop screaming. Their daughter Kelly, 15 years old, watched her father come home each night, take off his black tie, and sit at the kitchen table unable to eat. People still ask how he carried on. The answer is that he simply refused to let the club die with its supporters. 4 days after Hillsborough, Liverpool played again. Kenny picked the team, walked out at Goodison Park for the derby, and watched his players win 3-2 in a game that felt like it impossible to breathe. A week later, they beat Sheffield Wednesday in the rescheduled semi-final. On the 26th of May, in the hottest FA Cup final anyone could remember, Liverpool faced Everton again. Kenny, still playing at 38, came off the bench in extra time, with the score at 2-2. Ian Rush scored in the 95th minute, then again in the 104th. Liverpool won the cup. 3 days after that, on the final day of the league season, they travelled to Arsenal needing to win by 2 clear goals to pip them to the title. Michael Thomas scored in the last minute of the last game to make it 2-0 to Arsenal. Liverpool lost the league by the narrowest possible margin on goals scored. Kenny stood on the Highbury pitch and applauded the travelling fans anyway, because they had sung through 90 minutes of heartbreak, and he could not bear for them to feel alone. That summer he looked like a ghost. The weight had fallen off him, his eyes were hollow, and every public appearance was agony. Yet when the 1989-90 season began, he was back on the training pitch, barking orders in that soft voice that somehow carried authority no shitting ever could. Liverpool won the league again, their 18th title with games to spare. Kenny lifted the trophy at Anfield on the 28th of April 1990, smiled for the cameras, then went home and cried in the bathroom so the children would not see. He lasted 9 more months. The strain of Heysel, the strain of Hillsborough, the strain of carrying a city that was still burying its dead finally broke him. On the 22nd of February 1991, after a 4-4 draw with Everton in an FA Cup replay, he told the chairman he was finished. He drove home, walked through the front door, and told Marina he had resigned. She thought he was joking until she had never known him to walk away from anything. He wasn't joking. He was admitted to hospital the next day with exhaustion and what we would now recognize as severe trauma. The man who had attended 66 funerals, who had held the hands of strangers while they buried their children, finally allowed himself to fall apart. Blackburn Rovers rang 8 months later. Jack Walker's millions were pouring into Ewood Park, and they needed someone who understood pressure. Kenny said yes, because football was the only medicine he knew. In 1995, with Alan Shearer scoring 4 fun and Tim Sherwood breaking up play in midfield, Blackburn won the Premier League. Kenny stood on the pitch at Anfield on the night they clinched it. Liverpool fans applauded the team that had beaten them to the title, because it was Kenny's team. There wasn't a dry eye in the KOP. He managed Newcastle, managed Celtic again, but Liverpool never left him. In January 2011, with the club 18th in the table and the owners tearing the soul out of the place, the call came again. He was 59 years old and had nothing left to prove, yet he walked back into Melwood like he had never been away. 13 months later, he stood in the Wembley Tunnel before the League Cup final against Cardiff City. Liverpool were underdogs, written off, but Kenny had rebuilt the spine. Reina, Skritel, Adja, Gerrard, Suarez, Carroll. They won on penalties. When Craig Bellamy smashed home the decisive kick, Kenny's face cracked into the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him in years. He left the manager's job again that summer, but he never really left the club. You see him now at Anfield in the director's box, quieter than he used to be, clapping politely when the team scores. He still signs every autograph, still stops for every photograph, still remembers the names of people he met at funerals 35 years ago. The Marina Dalglish Centre for Oncology at University Hospital Aintree bears his wife's name, because when she faced breast cancer in 2003, they decided no family should ever go through it alone. They have raised millions, saved countless lives, and done it without ever seeking praise. Kenny Dalglish won everything there is to win. League titles with Celtic, 3 European Cups with Liverpool. The lot as a player-manager, a Premier League with Blackburn, but the numbers only tell a fraction of the story. The real measure of the man is that he carried the grief of 2 tragedies most people could not survive one of. Kept showing up, kept playing, kept managing, kept attending funerals, and somehow still found a way to make people believe again. Forget the goals and the trophies for a moment. The true greatness of Kenny Dalglish shows that he turned up when turning up seemed impossible, stood in the rain beside strangers who had lost everything, and then went out and won the double anyway. There has never been another like him, and there never will be.